Again, welcome to ASQ Technical Innovation, ASQ Innovation Technical Community. And tonight we have our phenomenal speaker, Miss Karyn Buxman, with Try Humor for a Change, Harnessing Humor for Creativity and Innovation. You are in for a treat because Miss Buxman is a neurohumorist. Now, I don't know if I was the only one that was under a rock that didn't even know that this was a thing, but this is a thing and she is a thing and she is going to be phenomenal tonight. So you can find her phenomenal strategic humor at her TED Talk, How Humor Saved the World. You can look her up online for her upcoming book, Funny Means Money, and Strategic Humor for Influence and World Domination. Her career really resides at the intersection of humor and the brain, and she is going to bring wisdom, experience in the form of humor like you are not going to believe. She speaks to international organizations all across the world, has a pedigree that includes over 800 clients across 30 years, all of the major agencies and names in the world, including the $1 Million Roundtable. So let's get ready to welcome Miss Karyn Buxman to our ASQ Innovation TC event tonight, because she is serious about humor. Without further ado, let's turn it over to Karyn.
Surprise you to know that humor isn't always funny. So let's take a look at this next slide. Nice little puppy here. Here you are at the beginning of our time together. Take a look again at the end. But maybe you don't. In a state of relaxation. If it's pressed against the roof of your mouth, like there's a wad of peanut butter up there, then you tend to be in a state of tension. When you are in that state of tension, every single body system is affected. And more importantly, is your ability for creativity and your ability for innovation goes down. Our next slide. This reminds me of a quote by a gentleman named E.B. White. And E.B. White once said, humor can be deceptive as a frog can, but the thing dies in the process and the innards are of interest to only the pure scientific mind. So I'm just letting you know right now, I dissect humor, so you don't have to. Next slide. I do have a disclaimer that while this is about research and while I have dissected frogs and humor, there were no frogs harmed in the creation of this presentation. This next part that we're going to participate in is it requires you to be interactive, and I want you to have access to your keyboard, your chat, whatever that may be. We're going to do a short run of this or that. I want to get a feel for the folks here in the group. And so I want you to tell me, for instance, with this next slide, you see chocolate ice cream, vanilla ice cream. So in the chat, write chocolate if you're a chocolate person, vanilla if you're a vanilla person. We got some answers coming in there, Rhonda.
Yes, so I think we're trending slightly towards vanilla, but chocolate is catching up. We have one that loves both. Slightly,
right.
slightly strong on vanilla, though.
All right, that's good. So next slide. Are you a mountain person or are you a beach person? In the chat, mountain or beach? Mountain or beach?
Got a lot of beach coming in, mountain maybe catching up. We're very close to 50-50 there.
Okay.
And we got another both.
Awesome. All right. How about this next one? Are you a morning person or are you a night owl?
we have a okay, a lot of mornings, some are nuns, and some are never. A lot of I think you're trending highly to the morning.
Okay, I'm a night owl myself, but and so this time frame for me is awesome. All right, so the next one, are you a dog person or a cat person?
Oh wow, you have predominantly dog, one neither, one both. That's amazing.
Okay. Interesting, very interesting.
One cat vote.
Well, let's take a look at the next one. And this is, if you are watching something, would you rather watch a comedy or would you rather watch a thriller?
We have a lot of comedies coming in. I'd say you're 2/3 comedy, maybe 1/3, maybe 3/4 comedy, 1/3 thriller.
Okay, this is great. This tells me a lot because I am somebody who is very, very much pro comedy, and we're going to talk about why that is and how we're going to wire our brains by doing this intentionally and consistently. But I have to tell you, a little known secret about me is I love zombies. And I am downtown San Diego, and this past week we had an event that happens almost every year, with the exception of COVID, and that is Comic-Con. And this is my little secret that people don't know because I love zombies, and I go to this event every year. 140,000 plus people convene on the San Diego Convention Center, and inside are acres and acres and acres of displays and things on the trade show from different kinds of filmmakers and different kinds of organizations and companies. And we have Pixar, and we have Disney and AMC and Marvel and DC and all of those other ones. And one year, a couple of years ago, I'm such a fan of The Walking Dead. And they had this huge display of The Walking Dead there. And it was almost the size of a city block. And inside this chain link fence are dozens of zombies. We're talking professional zombies. These folks have had their makeup done by Hollywood artists. They've been taught how to make sounds like real zombies and how to walk like real zombies. And I was just fascinated by this. And I would spend hours just standing at this display. And at the end of the day, I heard the overhead announce, everybody out the front doors, it's time to close down, but I wanted to get one more look at my zombies. And so I go back to where all the zombies are, and because it's the end of the trade show day, they opened the chain link fence. And as they open it, zombies begin walking out, never breaking character. And two zombies spy me, and they start walking right toward me. And this one is making eye contact, and he's putting his arm out. And my prefrontal cortex is like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. However, my chest was getting a little tight, and my It almost touched me, and I could see the skin coming off of his face and the yellow teeth and the drool and everything. And by this time, my cerebral cortex is to convince me that zombies aren't real, but my limbic system isn't having it. It's just screaming, "You're gonna die, let's go." And so I'm in agreement. I turn to run, and the other zombie has snuck right up behind me. Next slide, you're gonna see. I screamed like a little girl. I was terrified. I was terrified here. What happened? I had an amygdala hijack. My brain got hijacked by an imagined threat. My imagined threat was zombies. But unfortunately, we are dealing with imagined threats every single day. And when we deal with these brain threats, it causes us to lose that ability to be creative. It causes us to lose that ability to be innovative, to problem solve, to think straight. And so we want to do all that we can to make sure that that doesn't happen. In this next slide, as if you weren't scared enough all the time by the brain threats that you give yourself, we throw in COVID, we throw in climate change, we throw in killer hornets. And if that's not enough, let's hit the next slide for a second. I don't know if any of you were fans, but Klondike pulled the Choco Tacos from the shelves. I don't know how much more a person can take from this. So let's go back to that previous slide for a second, Rhonda. The scare model. This is based off the work of David Rock, and there have been a number of people who have adapted his work. I like this model just a little bit better than his original. But these are the 5 primary areas where you can undergo brain threat, which is going to really dampen your ability to be creative and innovative. And we're going to go through these just rather simply at this point in time. And if you want to do a deep dive, we can schedule a time one-on-one later. But significance is about the relationship that you have with another person or persons. And so this is about status. Is there a hierarchy? Generally speaking, there is a hierarchy, whether it's a subtle one or it's a very obvious one. But the person who is in the lower part of that hierarchy can have a brain threat, which can start shutting things down. And this could be something, this person could be your job or your boss. They could be a cop. It could be an in-law. It could be somebody in the office who you're kind of envious because they have a better car than you, or somebody's just having a better hair day than you, or their kids are better behaved than yours. Doesn't matter. It's just whatever you perceive as a hierarchy. The next one is certainty. And our brains crave certainty. And when we do not know what the outcome of something is, if it's a high enough level of uncertainty, it can cause stress. Now, some uncertainty you can leverage. I mean, who hasn't been caught in binge watching a show because at the very end, they leave you on a cliffhanger and your brain has to know. I mean, I was just going through the series of 24 with Kiefer Sutherland. That was like crack to me because I had to know at the end what was going to happen next. So I was just going to watch the next few minutes of the next one. And then boom, there I am again, caught in the loop. So certainty, how can we create certainty for ourselves and others? Autonomy, basically this boils down to, don't you tell me what to do. And this again might be a very obvious one. It might be more subtle. We saw a lot of this uptick during COVID with people who, were uncomfortable with both the uncertainty about the virus and the vaccines, but also wanting the autonomy to make their own decisions as to whether they would mask or whether they would vaccinate or all of those things. So autonomy is that we want to be able to have control. Relatedness is the threat because we are born social animals. We are born to be connected to other people. We may be socialized out of that as we're growing up and start finding that we don't want to be as connected to others. But when we are in a state of stress, we tend to isolate. And this isn't good because when we get isolated, again, causes a brain threat, causes us to shut down. And the last is equity. We want equality. We want fairness. And if we feel like we're being treated unfairly, whether it's a portion size at dinner, whether it's the size of a salary, whether it's certain rights that we don't have, at a more global level, these are all the kinds of things that can create brain threats. And if we scroll down past Choco Taco, gonna see a brain on fire. And what's interesting about this is that when our brain is under threat, it does set our brain on fire. This is true for you. It's true for the people you're working with, for the people you're trying to serve. Any of you who are working with folks that either handle money or handle somebody's health, or they're handling somebody's body or anything along those lines, one of the top things that you need in this relationship is trust. Trust. And then when brains are on fire, it's very difficult to establish that. The other thing about this is that the stressful kinds of things that we often think of are simply anticipatory. We're imagining what might happen if, there's a layoff, what might happen if something, my son doesn't get into the college that he wants to get into. What might happen if? These are not real events, but just thinking about them can create the same brain state as if they are already happening. And it's okay. Our bodies were designed to deal with this short term. But what we found, especially over the last few years, was it wasn't short term. We thought we were signing up for a stressful sprint, and then it turned into a marathon, and eventually it was an Ironman. Another thing that maybe you know, maybe you don't. Did you realize that stress can make you dumber? It's true. Studies have shown that when you are under stress, you can lose up to 10 IQ points. I don't know about the rest of you. I don't have 10 to spare. I am trying to save every last brain cell and IQ point that I have. A couple of years ago, we were looking for an apartment, and it was very last minute. It was a little bit stressful. And we go to this apartment building to have a tour and see if maybe we might be able to get one of the apartments, and apartments were just being snatched up left and right. And as we were sitting there, a couple comes out of it. So they're smiling. And my husband says to them, do you live here? And the woman nodded yes. And so I said, what do you like about this place? And then the woman held up her thumb and forefinger as if to indicate a very small amount. And she said, English. And then with her thumb and forefinger, I realized she meant she didn't speak much English. And I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable, but my brain was under threat. And so I said, oh, oui, no problem. Oui. And it was like, oui. The woman is Hispanic. Why am I speaking French? It slipped out of my mouth. And my husband and I looked at each other and we just began laughing uncontrollably. I mean, they looked at us like we were crazy. But I had IQ pulled from my brain just because I was under stress. And I know that probably some of you have either had children or friends or a spouse or yourself where you've done something and you said to yourself, what was I thinking? And the issue was you weren't thinking. You were having an amygdala hijack. So next slide. Why humor? Okay, hang on there because I'm getting here. Every single body system that is affected negatively by stress can positively be affected by humor. And I want to clarify for you, though, that when I'm talking about humor, I am not talking about being funny. So Put in the chat, yes or no, if you think you have a sense of humor. Yes or no, if you think you have a sense of humor.
Everyone has said yes. No one has said yes, and somewhat demented. There we go. And all that.
That is awesome, because if nothing else, it is socially unacceptable to admit that you don't have a sense of humor. It's a highly desirable trait. Whether you're looking for a leader or a lover, people are looking for someone with a sense of humor as one of the top desirable traits. Here's the next question for you. Yes or no? Do you think you're funny? Do you think you're funny? Yes or no?
Everybody is saying yes.
Oh, wow. We have a self-selected group. I love this. I love this. Now, there's bound to be one or two of these folks that are saying yes and the others are thinking no.
Well,
not really.
they've we have about 4 or 5 that have qualified it with sometimes.
With sometimes. That's great. That's great, because those of you who are funny, you find that people find you to have a bit of a magnetic personality. People are attracted to people who are funny because it makes them feel good. That being said, everything else that I'm about to share with you really helps if you have a sense of humor, but it does not require that you be funny. So takes the pressure off, because so often I hear, but I'm not funny. And my answer is great. Great, because it's more important to see funny than it is to be funny. You want to be the humor appreciator, but you don't need to be the humor initiator. The next slide lists 3 purposes of humor. And this was one of the, I think, greatest insights that I had several years ago. Because when people think of humor, they think of the first purpose, which is entertainment. Entertainment. Now, when your purpose is to entertain someone, your purpose is to make them successful. You measure your success by the number of laughs that you get. Now, if you're in comedy, it's LPMs, laughs per minute. The higher the laughs per minute, the higher wage you're going to get as a comedian, because when you're getting up there to 16 or more laughs per minute, you are killing it. But that's only in entertainment. The next purpose of humor that I identify is I influence. We use humor to help educate. We use humor to persuade. We use humor to be more creative. We use humor to be innovative. We use humor to inspire. We use humor to motivate and negotiate, and all of these things. We use humor to influence others. Now, how do we measure our success? Through much of that, you might measure your success through your quality and or quantity of your relationships, particularly in business. But it's not in laughter. When you're using humor to influence somebody else, you're not counting the number of laughs per minute or how often you make them laugh. You're looking at what is your desired outcome from the influence. Did you help teach them better? Did you help move them toward a belief or a thought or an insight that you wanted them to have? These are the things that fall under influence. And then the third one, the W, stands for well-being. And this is something that probably has the longest track record of research. We've known for decades and decades in the field of psychoneuroimmunology, spelled just like it sounds. We know that whatever body system can be about humor that is constructive and not destructive, because humor can be a weapon or a tool. And I'm talking about the kind of humor that we use to help bond with other people, to help make people feel part of a group. But when we're using constructive humor, we find that the circulatory system improves. We find that the cardiovascular system improves. It actually can lower LDL, the bad cholesterol. It can make vessels stretchier, lower blood pressure. There's less cortisol in your body with consistent use of humor, lowers the need for plaque. Endocrine system. We have found that people who are diabetic or pre-diabetic, it lowers their fasting glucose. It lowers the proteins that can be harmful to kidneys. It's just every single body system, your immune system, short-term, mid-range, long-term. All of these things can come together with the use of constructive humor. The brain, this is so cool. With the brain, we know that when we are using humor, when you're experiencing humor, if you were to have your head attached to a bunch of electrodes, a friend of mine, Dr. Lee Burke, he works up at Loma Linda University. He studied two groups, studied their brains. One group was Saving Private Ryan, and the other one was something that was humorous of their choosing. And what he found was that these two different brain patterns, the ones who were watching humor showed the same kinds of brain patterns, gamma waves, as people who are in deep meditation, people who are practicing mindfulness. These folks were more focused. They were more creative. They were more alert than people who were in the other group, who were watching something that was very exciting and stimulating, but it wasn't giving them the same kind of healthy brainwave patterns. The next slide, I'm kind of a little ahead of myself here, was that, humor is a whole brain activity. And your prefrontal cortex is the wit. That's where you are analyzing whether or not this is something funny. This is where you are looking at, what are these two different ideas? How do they come together? And do they come in a way that surprises and delights me? That, folks, is the same kind of process that you're using with creativity. Humor can be a shortcut because it's a fun way. It's your brain is not under pressure. And studies have shown that people who were doing playful exercises or improv or humorous exercises before they sat down to do work that involved creativity and innovation actually had much higher levels of creativity and higher levels of problem solving than the groups who did not. So that's wit. Your limbic system is engaged in emotions, and this is mirth. This is that feeling, that funny feeling when you see something and you go and you think to yourself, oh, that's funny. The feeling that you have, for me, I feel it more like in my core. It's like, oh my gosh, that is so funny. And the mirth is the emotional part of it. And then if you are so entertained, so tickled by the humor that it evokes a response, then laughter originates from the occipital lobe. And you can have humor without laughter. You can have laughter without humor. But when the two of them come together, oh my gosh, it is just such a wonderful, wonderful feeling. We also have in the brain something called mirror neurons. And the mirror neurons are those neurons that when we see something, because of the location in our brain, we tend to feel what the other person is feeling. We tend to mimic the other muscle responses that they're having. So if someone smiles at you, that triggers your mirror neurons and you smile back. If someone is laughing and it triggers your mirror neurons, this is why you laugh. You may not even know what's funny. A lot of sitcoms, when they're not sure if they're really that funny, they'll put in a laugh track. because you will start laughing when you hear the laughter, even if you're not really that entertained. So it's really very, this is why I'm a neurohumorist. I like to dive deeper maybe than you have. The very next slide is the TEDx slide. And if you want to hear a little bit more about the brain and where this goes and how that some of the other health benefits and stuff, you can go to that. It's just is one that I came across years ago, this concept of an emotional scale. And at the very top, we have joy and appreciation and love and happiness. And down at the bottom, we have despair and fear and powerlessness, and then all of the emotions in between. And what often happens is that people want to feel happy, they want to feel appreciation or love, but they're down at the bottom. It's almost like Maslow's hierarchy. And to get from the bottom to the top can be a big jump. And sometimes it's too big of a jump. But humor can help you move incrementally. And if you can move from despair to anger, and from anger to frustration, and from frustration to hope, then happiness is a much easier jump than if you're all the way down at the bottom. And so let's take taking action now and how you're going to harness the humor. Does anybody at this point have any questions that they want to put in the chat? And if I'll also try to ask again at the end if anyone has any questions.
I don't see any questions in right now, Karyn.
Okay, well, let's go to the next slide. And these are 4 ways that you can use humor that will help increase your abilities to be more creative, be more innovative, and get through any type of change that might be stressful or flagging brain threats. So, very next slide says distract. Humor can help you distract in a situation. And it's not that you want to put your head in the sand, but if you are in a situation and you just have zero control over the situation, say you're on the freeway and you are boxed in on your left, on your right, traffic is gridlocked for 2.5 miles in each direction. Unless you're Tony Stark with an Iron Man jetpack, you're not going anywhere. So what are your choices? You can sit and stew in your own juices, which is not good juju for your body and brain, or you can come up with a distraction. Now, there's lots of distractions. You can pull up, all sorts of things on YouTube that are political commentary and news about climate change and all of that kind of stuff. Not going to make you feel any better. But if you want to stop that chaotic cascade of neurotransmitters, even if it's just for a few seconds, you can stop pumping the stress juice by trying a little humor. This next slide by Viktor Frankel. Viktor Frankel was, probably some of you are familiar with that name. He was a prisoner of war, World War II, in Auschwitz during the Holocaust. And even though he was facing such deplorable conditions, even death, he was still able to find humor even in his situation in the concentration camp. He said, it's well known that humor, more than anything else in the human makeup, can afford an aloofness and an ability to rise above any situation, even if only for a few seconds. And folks, sometimes a few seconds is all you got. Sometimes it's what you strive for, but even a few seconds will give you a brain break and can periodically stop that cascade of negative neurotransmitters. Next slide. Here's a quick brain break. Funny memes. Looking at funny things when your replacement head finally arrives in the mail. This is an example of a micro brain break. The next slide. Let's try playing this, Rhonda, and if it doesn't play, I put the QR code so that people can go watch it on their own as well.
Sorry, I don't see something to a video.
Sometimes if you click on the slide, it'll give you a little play button at the bottom.
It did not, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Well, there is the QR code, or you can go to YouTube and just type in laughing babies. This video is just such a marvelous example of mirror neurons and the smiling and laughter, which establishes safety. You know, one of the little babies starts laughing, they all start laughing, and it's just this cascade of laughter over and over and over again, which keeps regenerating the laughter. And this goes on for at least a minute and a half or 2 minutes. I never show the entire thing, but you know, my friend and colleague whom I mentioned earlier, Dr. Lee Burke, said if we took what we now know about laughter and bottled it, it would require FDA approval. It helps with every single body system, and it definitely helps us to be more creative, alert, and innovative. This next slide is an example of distractions that you can find through technology. You can, you know, look on your phone, you can look on your computer, you can look on your pads. There's lots of different ways to find shows that have no agenda. There's no political agenda. The one that says Cabin Pressure, this is a delightful British broadcast. It was originally radio. I think now it's on podcast, and 27 episodes that are each about 22 to 25 minutes long. Listen to the first one. If it doesn't grab you, you have to go no further, but it is, I think, the best written auditory comedy that I have heard maybe ever. It's just brilliantly written. So going to these when you feel that the creativity and innovation is lacking, you don't even have to watch the whole thing, but I strive for at least 10 to 20 minutes of humor a day. I think, you know, a lot of the studies have been done with periods of time around 20 minutes. I don't think that there's any exact number. A lot of it just depends on you, but there's external things that you can strive for. Or click on the next one. You can tap into what I call moments of mirth, MOMs. These are internal. These are your own memories that you have. And my challenge for you would be to start writing down in a journal or in a list or somewhere the humorous memories as they come to you. And the more you can write them out, the better, because as you're writing them out, you are really having that experience. And you may start recalling memories that you had forgotten if you start sharing these, like at family reunions or anniversaries or reunions or whatever. Start collecting these. This story is one that I remind myself of when I'm stuck in traffic. And my youngest son, Adam, was in first grade, and it was time for him to catch the school bus. And I looked at my watch and realized it was time for the bus, and he hadn't even come through the kitchen yet for breakfast. And so I yelled his name, no answer, yelled it again, no answer. So now I head to his bedroom, and as I'm approaching his bedroom door, I hear this strange thumping noise, and I hear, it sounds like he's singing. And I'm thinking, what in the world? So I open his door slowly, and there is my first grader jumping up and down on his bed, swinging school clothes over his head. He's jumping in his underwear. He's singing. He's kicking. He's dancing. And I lost it. And I said to him, what do you think you're doing? And he stopped jumping. He gave me just a smile from ear to ear, and with the wisdom of Yoda, he says, Mom, don't you think getting dressed in the morning ought to be more fun? I'm ashamed to say my response was, no. But in hindsight, probably would have been better if I had not been so negative about it. Because really, what if we could all start the day off with a little more fun, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's getting dressed. And if any of you want to try jumping on your bed tomorrow, I encourage it, but I take no responsibility. Really hard if you have a water bed. This next slide is just kind of a recap of what I mentioned earlier. There's lots of ways to distract yourself, but not all distraction is equal when it comes to your health. And while Saving Private Ryan might take your mind off your troubles, it's going to fire up your brain. So you're going to want to choose humor. Next slide. I want you to think about, what are your humor distractions? And I want you to write those down. I want you to think about, what is your go-to? You want to have a plan of action the next time this happens, so that you don't have to make your brain think, because your brain is already having trouble thinking if it's under pressure, because you pulled from your prefrontal cortex into your limbic system. So think about your humor distractions. The next slide says reframe. And reframing, this is a huge part of creativity. Reframing, seeing things from a different perspective. And with humor, a lot of times it's playing with our pain. But when we are attempting to reframe, when we are attempting to be creative, typically this requires a high level of cognitive power. It takes a lot of energy for your brain to problem solve, for your brain to be creative. And quite frankly, our brains, not to say they're lazy, but they would take the least path of resistance. It doesn't want to work hard. However, as I mentioned earlier, humor is that comparing of unlike ideas. Automatically, it's pairing things that you wouldn't normally put together. And that is along the same line. So practicing humor, practicing reframing can help you be more creative and innovative. The next slide was a time that I was remembering that I was outside. I was 8 years old. I'm raking leaves with my dad and my brother, and just being playful, I reached over and I pulled my dad's glasses off his face and I put them on mine. And because they were so big, I had to tip my head back to keep them on from falling off my nose. And while I was looking up in the air, I said, "Oh my gosh, look, there's an airplane." And my brother said, "So what?" And I said, "Well, airplanes, you can hear them all the time, but you can't see them." And my dad looked at me and he goes, "Sure you can." And he pulled the glasses off, put them back on. And that's how I ended up in the ophthalmologist's office the next day. And when I came out of the ophthalmologist's office, I was sporting these lovely tortoiseshell cat-eye glasses. And as I'm walking out of the building that was red, now I notice that it's made up of all of these bricks. And as I walk to the car, I realized that that big green tree that was giving us shade had all these little leaves in it, hundreds and hundreds of leaves. Now, those bricks and those leaves were there all along, but I didn't have the lens to see them. This is the same thing with humor. You have to practice. You have to put on the lens of humor, because many times people will say, "But you don't understand. There's nothing funny happening where I live. There's nothing funny happening in my life." And if that is your belief, that is your reality. But I will tell you that if you start asking yourself to question, what is funny? What am I missing? What's whimsical? What feels good? You're going to start seeing and hearing things that other people might be missing. Like this next slide. Reframing the 4 stages of quarantine. How many of you had either 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these stages? Real quick in the chat. 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these stages of quarantine.
Reading, 3 comes to mind for a lot of all of them. 2, 3, 1, all.
Love it. Well, this next slide, I would ask you, what do Corona, the martial arts, coronavirus, and a Greek restaurant have in common? And the commonality is humor. There was a Greek restaurant owner. His name was Vasilios Sampis, and he owned this little Greek restaurant in Wisconsin 30 years ago. He chose the name for his business because it was just a letter of the alphabet, because it was different, catchy, easy to pronounce, and he named his restaurant Omicron, which was really good for 30 years until COVID hit. Who would have thought that Omicron could be such a negative? And so he reframed this using humor. While so many other restaurants were closed down, and instead of pushing back, because the martial art of what is it? Not jiu-jitsu, Aikido. It was humor Aikido. He took the negative energy that was thrust at him and he used it to his advantage. And so what he did was he started, up until that point, they had not served beer in their restaurant. He put Corona beer on the menu. He said, tell the people we have plenty of food, we're not a virus. He offers Corona beer and put up a sign and made t-shirts that said that they could get Corona at Omicron. And he made a killing. People lined up to be part of that humorous process, to have their picture taken at that place and to order food there. So reframing can be to your advantage. The next is relate. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, when our brain shut down, we start feeling disconnected, we start isolating. Humor, on the other hand, increases likability. It increases trust. It even creates the production of something in your body called oxytocin, which is also referred to as the cuddle hormone. When you share humor, you create oxytocin. When the other person receives your humor and enjoys it, they create oxytocin. And that is part of what creates that feeling of connectedness. So when you want to use humor, how can you use humor that will be relatable? I think that if you don't know the person well, go to what is most personal, what is most common, because what is most the different kinds of cultural references, but I tell stories that people can relate to about parents and about kids and about relationships and all of those things that people can relate to and feel more connected. And when you're more connected, you lower your brain threat and increase your ability to be more creative. This next slide shows people in my tribe. What you want to do is find your tribe. You would probably be surprised to know that this particular group of people, one is a physician, one is a counselor, one is a college administrator, one is a best-selling author. I mean, all of these people have different things in common, different things that are differentiating them, but the thing that connects all of them is humor. And so you want to see how you can find your tribe. This last one is refueling. And when you are refueling, what happens over long periods of time is that you pull from your reserves, pull from your reserves, pull from your reserves. You lower your bandwidth. And over time, it makes it harder and harder and harder to be creative and to be innovative. But if you are consistently and intentionally over time, let's hit that next slide. If you are consistently and intentionally using humor, you build up that reserve. You build up a physical reserve. You build up a social reserve. You build up your cognitive reserve. you will be able to maintain your ability to problem solve, your ability to be creative, your ability to be innovative. If you create this practice, best time to start 20 years ago, next best time to start right now. Every day, consistently, a little bit of humor. One of the things that I have a QR code there. I started doing this for myself and just a few other people, but people started asking to be added to the list. And I put out a bit of humor, a bit of whimsy that can be consumed in less than 60 seconds with the sole purpose of consistency, intentionality, rewiring your brain. So if you want to participate in that, you can do the QR code or humorhabits.com. The next slide. This is just an example of some of the things that you can put into your brain on a consistent basis. This SGN, some good news. Krasinski, he started this during COVID, and it's too bad that he didn't keep it up. But there are a lot of episodes on YouTube. Maria Shriver has something called the Sunday Paper, and it's bits of good news every Sunday. It's just good news, good news, good news, because our brains constantly are seeking threats. That is our brain's goal. Our brain's purpose is to keep us safe and to keep us alive. And so we are hardwired to search for threats. We need to unwire some of that and rewire our brains to be able to find the humor so that we can have those things that we want, like the creativity and innovation. The next slide. Get an accountability partner. I found that years ago, I had a friend she suffers from depression. She suffers from suicidal thoughts. She's very open about it. She's even written a best-selling book about it. And I told her, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, I will send you something humorous every day. And at first I was feeling so magnanimous because I'm doing this for her. But what I realized so quickly was that I was the one who was benefiting even more, because this totally reframed my day. I start every morning with 15. Next slide. Lighten up. We have lost the art of laughing at ourselves. And so many times in our work, we have confused the word serious with the word solemn. When I'm working with high performers and I ask them, why aren't you using humor more in your work? I'm afraid people won't take me seriously, or I'm afraid they won't think I'm serious. But we've forgotten that you can be serious without being solemn. If you doubt that, then, think about Southwest Airlines. They're constantly using humor. Their number one purpose is to keep you safe. They have a very serious purpose, but they deliver it whimsically. They deliver, there's 2 masks that will fall down from the compartment above. If you are traveling with a child or more than one child, put your own oxygen mask on first. And if you're traveling with 2 or more children, pick your favorite. They're constantly doing things that are humorous, but you get that message, the serious message. The next slide, your question. And what I'm going to do if anyone had a short question, we probably got time for 1 or 2, and then we will send you on your way.
Yes, we have from Katari Brunel. Good ideas to build in more humor every day. For those of us who don't do this naturally, i.e. 10 to 20 minutes of humor with video clips, journal, or your own humorous memories, what else should we try?
There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of apps. I am a big fan of YouTube. because you can train YouTube to show you what you want more of. For the video clips, I put in laughing babies enough time that comes up. One of the habits that I teach, I have 10 humor habits. And if you want to download that cheat sheet, it's humor. Oh yeah, that's where humorhabits.com is also. But to manipulate your environment to increase the likelihood of experiencing more humor. Also, there's a lot of people who bring joy when they enter a room, and then there's the rest of them that bring joy when they leave a room. Be intentional about who you spend your time with. There's a lot of people that just spend their time being so negative, and if you can intentionally spend more time that you will have to spend with other negative people. There's also groups. One of the organizations that you might want to check into is AA, as in Apple, T as in Tom, H as in Harry, AATH.org. It's the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. They put on an annual conference. I have no financial ties to them, but I am a huge fan of theirs because they do such great work. They also have a lot of resources available. And of course, I would love for you to connect with me because I also have a ton of resources. And if you're up for, daily short bursts, then I encourage you to go to humorhabits.com. And also connect with me. Challenges, there's not a line, it's a moving target. And if you go to managinghumor.com, you can download the 7 competencies, but I'll give them to you quickly. One is your rapport. What's your relationship with that person? And this is the most highly violated one. We tend to think we know someone better than we really do. And then we crack a joke maybe about religion or gender or something that we don't know about that person, and we've offended them. The environment or context. Some humor is great in one context, fails horribly in another. Things that you can get a laugh at the bar when you're out for happy hour, probably not okay to share in the workplace. A is your, what is the word? I'm drawing a blank here. Not your authority, your ability to be authentic. Thank you. Authentic, because people can smell inauthenticity a mile away. You want to use humor that fits you. You don't want to just try being Gallagher, in the workplace. If you're not that kind of person, if you're not physical comedy or whatever, find humor that fits. S is safety. And by that, not just physical safety, but emotional safety. Anytime someone uses humor and then has to follow with, I'm joking, that was not a joke. That was a weapon. And so you want to use humor that doesn't violate safety. T is timing. You've heard the expression too soon, and that's what that has to do with. If people need emotional distance, humor comes from, a lot of times humor comes from pain, and you can laugh about it, but not until you have some emotional distance with it. And then the last 2 are your delivery and your content. And that's where people tend to want to start, is with their content and delivery. I think that those come last. Unless you're an entertainer, you want to understand those other 5. And when you are in an entertainment setting, there are little to no boundaries. But if you are using humor for influence and well-being, you really will benefit by keeping those competencies in mind as you create humor for your benefit and for the benefit of others. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Karyn. Yes, I think that rounds out our questions from the attendees.
All right. Well, let's just go to, all right, well, we'll do this one last slide real quickly. The one that says, "What's up, Doc?" My husband was interviewing POWs, former POWs from Vietnam, for a book that was just published called Captured by Love. And they had remarkable stories of romance, but they also used a lot of humor. And they were frequently pulled out of their cells and were interrogated and tortured. And one of the fellows, as they were the guard was pulling him out, he turned to his buddies and said, "I'm going to get the guard to say, 'What's up, Doc?'" And his buddies were laughing, and the anticipation was just heightened as to, this was the anticipation of something humorous. Days later, he returned and they said, "How did it go?" And he said, well, during his quote unquote quiz session, he told the interrogator that the food was bad. And when the interrogator said, "What is wrong with the food?" the POW answered, "There's not enough up, Doc, in it." And the interrogator replied, "You guessed it, what's up, Doc?" With that, I can say that humor gives us relief, it gives us hope, it gives us power, it gives us victory, and it makes us unstoppable. Next slide. If you want to connect with me at any of these, I love, this is my passion. My mission in life is to transform lives through the power of humor. And however, whether it's through my work or my network, I would love to continue to do that for you. So take a look at that. And then last but not least, we have one more tongue check. I hope at this point your tongue is relaxed in the bottom of your mouth and that you being crazy.
Karyn Buxman, thank you so much again. We are so glad that you are sharing Try Humor for a Change, harnessing humor for creativity and innovation. So thank you for all of you who attended tonight's ASQ Innovation TC session tonight with Miss Buxman. If you loved tonight's session, we have more ready to roll for you in just a few short weeks. We invite you to join ASQ Innovation TC, hear more about our ASQE in Insights on Excellence, and to join us at our next webinar events on 9/26, where we'll be meeting with Miss Erin Urban, Elevate Innovation, More Impact, Less Stress, and on 10/19 with Mr. Jay Weiser, turbocharging your organization's innovation approach, leveraging the 5 leadership superpowers. Again, as a reminder, we hope your 2023 is innovation filled and fueled. If you have not had a chance to engage and interact with our phenomenal 2023 officers, Miss Rebecca Mott, Miss Michelle Vargas, Miss Jackie Jolly, and Mr. Larry Miller, we invite you to connect with us through our chair at the email below. And again, we just big round of applause and thank you to our guest speaker, Miss Karyn Buxman tonight, and to all of you for sharing this evening with us. Again, we hope you have a wonderful summer. We will be on hiatus in August, joining you back again in September. Wishing you all a phenomenal evening, a wonderful week, and we'll look forward to reconnecting with you soon. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Miss Karyn Buxman via the URLs. I'll be sending out the deck and your RU certification. And again, our celebration of our phenomenal guest speaker tonight, Miss Karyn Buxman. Good night, everybody. This is ASQ Innovation TC out for this evening.